Hello and welcome to the Storage Syndicate Spotlight. Really excited to join you guys Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. So we are here live, and Murph and I are joined today by one of our team members at Legacy Developers, somebody that I've been working with now for it's coming up on 2 years a deal. It's kind of hard to believe, but it's been a bit. We've been dealing with this self-storage space, and excited as always. We're not really here to interview Adeel as much as we are to more talk a little bit about the state of self-storage today, and especially for us in what we deal with, which is like 95% raw land, going out and finding raw land to develop sites. And Adeel is literally the master of not only going out and finding raw land, but negotiating and getting great prices on it. So we want to just talk to you guys a little bit today about what's going on, what's happening, really, Adeel, how much different things have gotten, and kind of the wave that we've gone through from when you started in this wonderful space to now. But your story's so cool. I do want to do like we always do, and Adeel, we're busting Adeel's chops before we came on camera because Adeel works with us, so he sees enough of us every week, and we were kind of busting his chops because he doesn't tune in every Wednesday night. So if I say we do what we always do, that means nothing to Adeel because he doesn't watch our interviews every week. So we gotta bust his chops a little, but we always go back and kind of talk about the beginning. So I'm going to go back and just have you explain, first of all, how you got into real estate in the first place, and how long you've been involved in the general real estate space.
Yeah, so back in 2008 when the whole housing crash happened, I got out of the franchise business and got into my family was in real estate, and they got in probably at the worst time that you probably could get into real estate, thinking that the market was going to rebound as quickly, as things did, but it didn't pan out that way. So we, by not by choice, became landlords in a way, right? With holding on to all the properties, and then you start learning things, and from that progression, I started learning how to flip houses and acquire them at a steep discount, going through the sheriff sales and foreclosure process, and understanding how that whole process was working at the time. So it took me a little bit to understand initially how to grasp it and go out and find the properties. But in the beginning, it was more or less trying to find out, okay, you have a project here. How do you run the project? How do you run multiple projects and go from one house to multiple houses? And how do you acquire at a good price and learn how to do that over and over? But everything started getting better about, I would say, 2012, 2013, and 14. That's when things started getting better. So we cashed out a lot of on things that we had, and kept some of the things that we wanted to. And then after that, COVID hit, as you guys already know. So at that time, I was actually in a rental, and I learned the hard way of like, okay, well, you can't evict the person if they're not paying. So it was one of those numbers as well. But it was just something that I just realized. I was like, this isn't recession proof. Like, you're not in a recession proof business. You're always hound or bound down to something that the market's going to affect you, and then you're not able to do this. And I always looked for something that was kind of like a niche product or somewhere special and recession proof. And I always felt that, okay, I want to get into commercial real estate, but eventually I got into it. And when I did get hired,
Talk to us, not to cut you off, but I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because you joined the Legacy Developers team back in 2021. You were not brought on anywhere near the role you're doing now, but
no.
kind of leveraging some of the skills you had from doing flipping houses and building a rental portfolio, because you were dealing with so many contractors and so many subs at the time, and that was a skill that you developed. So tell me a little bit about what you originally brought into Legacy Developers to do.
Yeah, so I was actually hired as a project manager to manage the projects, that we had across, Texas, Florida, and New Jersey, and Allegheny at the time. So it was just, it was a completely different role. You're more on the construction side. You're more on the bidding side of things, understanding the RFPs, the RFIs, getting all those in. And then also just managing a schedule, right? You have to, as a project manager, you got to be very organized and very meticulous in what you do, and understand that, okay, it takes a lot of work to be, to get to where you need to be at when you're a project manager. So I understood that role very well. But how should I put this? It never really excited me as much as it did when I started realizing how fun it would be to start acquiring properties and or acquiring land. That was my big rush that I always got. It was like the whole chase. You find something, then you see it, and then you point down to it. So,
How
uh,
did that transition come about? Like you come into the office. I know at the time GSS, we GC GSS ourselves as legacy developers. We were the general contractors. Thus, you were running the request for proposals yourself. Since we've kind of gotten out of that game on our other projects, we have Barry Sherman do that. But how did you go from project manager to now acquisition specialist? How did that transition kind of take place?
it was mainly the waiting period for the bidding process for just for everybody to get all their bids back in. I thought it would have been quicker, much quicker process, but it became a negotiation phase, right? We started going back and forth with the GCs. Like, if they give me a bid for $2 million, I'm not going to sit there and say, okay, here, let me sign this dotted line for you and give it back to you, right? I'm going to negotiate it out. So that whole process took quite a bit of time. So within that time frame, I started realizing that, Alex, when I saw him in acquisitions, that he was overwhelmed a lot, and I was like, hey, in my downtime, let me start stepping in and start looking for sites and start finding sites. And let me tell you, it's much easier finding a 10-acre parcel than you're finding a single family house, or a single family home to flip. It's much easier finding a 10-acre parcel across the United States if you know what you're looking for and how to look for it. So for me, it was very natural to start looking online and understanding. Okay, then I started having to understand the metrics of uh, what is exactly needed for self storage.
I love that. Just to give you guys that are listening a little bit of scope of Adil's ability to find pieces of land, we reviewed roughly 1,200 sites in the fourth quarter of 2022. I don't have the number. I should have the number for the first quarter of this year now, but I don't remember it offhand. I remember the number from the fourth quarter of last year. Of those nearly 1,200 sites we reviewed, Adeel was responsible for about 95% of those coming onto our board. So he literally more than 1,000 pieces of land that he identified in a 3-month process to review for self-storage. So when he says he's able to find them, he is not speaking out of, he's not overblowing that story. He's really, really good at what he does. So let's kind of dig in now. We've kind of gotten the story of how you sort of slid your way into being the main acquisitions guy. Interesting enough, you mentioned Alex Rogers, who we interviewed a few weeks ago. Alex has since been promoted. He's now dealing in more of an operations role than an acquisitions role. One of the reasons he was able to be promoted into that is because you came in and were doing such an amazing job of helping him in that role. We obviously have Anthony Amuso now in there with you as well. So the two of you guys holding down that ship really strongly, which quite frankly, when I look at our deal board and what we have under contract or coming under contract, really, really awesome to see the work you guys are doing. I want to talk about it though, because it's been a roller coaster, right? Like in 2021, when you first came on, Legacy Developers bought 7 different sites that year, a few of which you were personally responsible for putting on the board. In 2022, we bought another site, and then we assigned 4 more to other developers, 3 of them as JV partnerships. Things got a little dry there last year, though. It got really challenging to find deals that made sense. So first of all, give me a little broader idea of like what are our metrics we're trying to accomplish when we get a piece of land under contract, and then what happened last year that made it so difficult to keep that pipeline flowing?
Um, One thing that makes it difficult, I definitely think, is you are at the mercy of the market, right? I mean, it is what it is when you see what you can. That's why we try to hit off market as much as we can as possible. Another thing is that, as you know this as well, is that brokers just don't simply answer sometimes. It's the most annoyingest thing. It's the most simple thing that you could probably carry around is your phone, but people
It is
don't answer it at
unbelievable.
all. So I think it was a lot of that, but I think sometimes, you go through these spells and you go through these runs of properties, and all of a sudden they come in floods. Like, I mean, right now we're at one right now where we have an influx of properties, of parcels that we're looking at right now and analyzing, and we have a good amount to go through, and we're sitting on a lot. So sometimes I feel like it depends on the broker, and also it also definitely 100% depends on the market as well. And
What
then
did you see happening in the real estate market, specifically for raw
rates.
land, early to mid last year?
I feel like rates really, going up affected the whole broader market a lot. I started hearing that excuse, or that reasoning, should I say, a lot by a lot of people. Rates going up. I mean, right now we just went a quarter basis points up, right? So it's inevitable, right? This is what it's going to happen. But I feel like people became more hesitant in in doing anything. It could be buying or selling. Do you know, they became hesitant, period, as investors, and I feel like that changed the game a lot. But now I'm starting to see people open up a little bit more and start being understanding that, hey, they were too how should I say, too timid at that time. And now they need to be a little more aggressive and say, hey, listen, wait, we haven't gotten any activity on our parcel in what, 12 months? I need to do something with this. I don't want to sit on this forever, you know?
Were you when the rates went up last May, we were safe to say, especially in some areas we're looking in, parts of Texas, parts of Florida, we were seeing some crazy land speculation, right? We were seeing prices for land that quite frankly were at historical highs. How long did it take you to see some of that seller expectation start to come back in line with what the reality of interest rates going up were?
I would say about 6 months. I would say definitely 6 months. Yeah, I thought it would have been quicker. I thought it would have been about 90 days, but no, it lasted a lot longer. I would say about 6 months later. Now, some of the people that I have reached out to prior are reaching out back to me and saying, hey, listen, do you remember that parcel that we discussed? Yeah, listen, my seller's open to having a discussion about it. So automatically it was like, boom, I started realizing that, okay, people are definitely opening up a little more, and they're becoming a little more realistic to what things are happening in the market.
A couple of things I want to comment on. You talked earlier a little bit about brokers and not answering their phone. There's a person that I've been lucky enough to be mentored by, Kent Clothier, who always said this phrase, "You're surrounded by a sea of mediocrity." And it never really sunk in until I started watching you try and call commercial real estate brokers, right? In the land of real estate, ostensibly, if you make it into the commercial side, that's like a level up. It's like being in the NBA versus college basketball, right?
100%.
Like supposedly it's supposed
Yeah.
to be like you're the cream of the crop. And I watch you calling these commercial brokers, like you'll call people 7, 8, 10, 15 times, email them daily, no response. It's hard to fathom how that person has made it to the level they're at. And it's not like their property is selling. Their property's still listed. It's still for sale. It's so I just want to throw that in there for our listeners. Like, listen, answer the phone. Like you
Yeah.
do simple stuff like answer the phone and send an email. You're actually separating yourself from a big percentage of who you otherwise would think are A players, but just not. So wanted to say that. The other thing I wanted to ask you personally, because it amazes me, how are you so able to just stone faced walk away from the table with people when you're in a negotiation? Because it's something I've watched you do many, many times, and I'm like blown away by your ability to just be like, nah, I'm out.
Um, I just feel like well, yeah. So in real life, I can't do that when it comes to relationships or any of that. Let's just put it that way, right? At work, I'm able to do that totally. It's just a switch. I just turn it on and off, and um, I always feel as if the deal, I'm pushing it, I'm pushing it. It's just not meant to be. It's just not meant to be. So I just am okay with walking away and saying, I look on the board and I have 300 underneath analyze. So I'm sitting on
Mm,
300 other sites that I could take a look at. And do I
love
want to
that.
run after this one where the broker is not even giving me any intention. We're not talking. Yeah, it could be a great site. It could be anything. But then it's going to be a nightmare when you have to go to closing with this guy. It's going to be a nightmare if you, God forbid, need an extension. It's going to be a nightmare when you need any type of due diligence from the guy that he might have from before. So you want to
Yeah.
cultivate that long-term relationship. So I always look at it like, yeah, I've lost some deals where I've really have taken it personally, but sometimes you just have to understand that, you know what, it wasn't meant to be, and you'll find another one that's going to be better than that.
Man, I hope that you guys that are listening are taking notes, right? I talk about this a lot when I'm teaching. I don't do this interview as a teaching thing, but when you take physical notes, you are about 10 times more likely to retain the information in your memory. So I hope you wrote that down. One of the things that you just said that really resonated with me is I'm trying to cultivate a long-term relationship, right? I'm not trying to get a contract signed. I'm trying to develop a relationship with someone where I can get to closing. And there's a lot of things. And for those of you who've only ever dealt in residential real estate, right? A timeline for a residential closing maximum is like 60 days from the time you sign a contract. And to get a contract signed usually literally takes a day or two because the contracts are all standard. So I guess I'll go through with you. Let's talk a little bit about like standard timeline from the time you, not even when you start analyzing a piece of land, but when you reach out to a broker, how long from then to getting a contract? And then from signing the contract, how long till we actually might close on a property in a commercial transaction? Because I think this timeline will blow some people away.
Oh my God. I have been working this deal in Connecticut that I just got off the phone with them about a couple hours ago. And I've been working that deal for about 4 months now, total. Meaning, letter of intent's been out. We've gone to contract, and I'm just waiting on the guy just to give me his final word back or whatever. But I've been working that deal for 4 months, so I actually let that go from my head. And today I get that call back of, okay, hey, listen, did you want me to just give you the signature and change one thing on the contract? Yeah, we could do it, but it has, if anything has changed, Thad and Murph, it's definitely the ability of a broker to get back to me or a seller to get back to his broker in regards to us purchasing a site. It's been it's been just gruesome. And why? I don't know. I don't I feel like some of these brokers just don't have the wherewithal or the the drive. I feel like they close one deal and they're just happy. I mean, that's how lucrative this business is, right? Like you
Yeah.
close a
I
deal
mean,
and
you're talking about a percent and a half on a
yeah,
$3 million deal. I mean, that
yeah,
sort of, takes care of some bills for the year.
yeah,
You're
exactly.
making 45, $50,000 on a single transaction. It's yeah, I mean, it pays some bills for sure. But
Yeah.
you're talking about not even closing. You're talking about 4 months since you sent a letter of intent. By the way, a letter of intent for us is a written offer. It's the same as if you made an offer on a house, right? It's not the contract, it's the offer. But 4 months, we aren't even at contract yet. In a standard residential deal, you'd have been moved in and like feel like you've lived in the place for a year by the time 4 months has gone by. We haven't even gotten a contract on the thing. Let's jump. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, you put this thing under contract in the next couple weeks. How long typically does one of these things take from the time you get it under contract? What's your due diligence period look like? What is your closing typically look like in a realistic scenario?
Realistically, we always try to go in at 90 days to be fair. If it's an approved use site, okay. So I'm going to use approved use just as approved, meaning that approved by right, you're allowed to build a self storage facility, just to make it easier for everybody on the call. And so 90 days, and then I always bake an extension in there 30 days because we just don't know. Sometimes things happen, right? So that's you're at 120 total. Um, if need be, we go back. We need maybe a 10-day or 2 week or whatever extension, but it usually within that time frame from an approved site, we're able to close on that. And so I would say, anywhere from 120 days, and anything that could delay the process, we always keep that in mind. And that's why I always try to go in at 90 days and not say, okay, I can close this in 60. I try to buy as much time as possible. especially when we're dealing with conditional use permits, or even a special use permit. Obviously, you're going to need as much time as work.
Explain for the
Yeah.
people listening that maybe aren't as familiar with, what we do as we are. What is a conditional use permit? What does that mean? What is a special use permit? For people that have only dealt in residential, they don't really understand that idea of, what the approvals are.
Yeah, no, totally. So cup approval, which is a conditional use permit, is it's an approved use for self storage, but there's conditions behind it. So that those conditions usually consist of a couple of things, which are site plans, and you're going to have certain meetings, and otherwise you'll have the neighborhood meetings that the neighbors can come out. It depends on the jurisdiction where you're at, what state you're in, and it depends. It depends exactly, I think, where you're at. Now, a rezone is completely where you're going to have to go through the rezone process. It's not an approved use, and it's going to be a lot more timely and costly in the long run. And you still have that chance of getting denied in that whole process as well. So that's why we always try to stick to the cups and the approved. So, we're in good territory, but the rezones are always good for barrier of entry. That means that no one's been able to, penetrate through those areas. And that's where we're trying to get through.
I get an interesting question a lot from people. They ask me, hey, why don't you get your sites all the way to full permits before you buy the site, right? We always will buy the site at entitlement. And what entitlement means is we have that cup approval, or we have that use by right. We know we can build the self-storage on it. Explain to me why we can't just go to the seller and say, hey, we need to have full permits before we can close on the land.
I think it's time. I think it's mainly the time. I don't think that the seller wants to wait. They just want site plan approvals, and they say, "Hey, okay, you're allowed to build." Building permits a completely different ballgame where you're allowed to build. Site plan approvals is okay. You're approved for the site now, and you're able to build what you're able to build. But hey, listen, now you need to go out and get building permits. So it's a completely different ballgame, and they don't want to wait around for that. I think it's a time. I think it's a simple thing. It's just time.
I always find that question to be so interesting. I'm like, because I think sometimes people don't really understand what that time is. So maybe you can give a little bit of insight into that. From the time that we close on the land, we've gotten site approval, we've had our 30-day closing period, we buy the piece of land. How long could it take, let's say, like typically, to get site plan to get full building permits, excuse me? Like, what are we talking about?
It could take you. This is a good one. I mean, it could take you, like, if you're saying up to, it could take you up to 6 months to get that for sure, I would say. And that's not, that's depending on what jurisdiction you're in. We've dealt with Marion County, which was a nightmare to deal with. And I feel like, it could take you a couple of months to several months, depending on where you're at. Sometimes you have no zoning, so it's a different story, and you don't need to go through that process. But if you're going through a whole cup approval, it could definitely take you up to 6 months for sure.
And so when you're trying to talk to owners, they're not like, hey, yeah, we'll take 90 days of due diligence and then another 6 months for building permits and wait a year to sell the land.
Yeah, they're not going to tie it up for that long with nothing that they're getting out of it. They're just tying it up, and that's one thing that they don't want to do.
So what is like the biggest hang up? Like, so would it be the municipality that you're actually working with? Does that kind of change, or is it just the slow interaction with municipalities, or?
Yeah.
The biggest like working with brokers don't call you back kind of thing.
yeah. The municipality calls you when they want to call you. They'll set the dates of when they're maybe a lot of these jurisdictions. Murph, that's a really good question, because a lot of these jurisdictions sometimes only have a meeting once a month. So you could only have a meeting with these guys once a month, So it's like, how do you understand the fact that, okay, you need to meet with somebody and you're trying to expedite the process, but you're only meeting on a monthly basis. It's very hard to do. It's very hard to do.
I kind of want to shift gears here a little bit. And I watch you. You're one of the guys that I'm not a stock guy. Like I don't deal with the stock market, but I know that's something that you've had some success with in your life. And so I kind of want to pick your brain about something specific to self-storage, and maybe you can put it into context for me with your knowledge of the market. I know you've had some success in that area in your life. Public Storage came, for those that don't know, Public Storage came in late 2022 to Life Storage. Public Storage is the largest REIT, real estate investment trust, publicly traded company in self-storage. Life Storage is either fourth or fifth, depending on the day. Public Storage went to Life Storage and offered to buy them out for $129 a share. At the time, I think Life Storage was trading for $110 a share. So they were offering a 17% premium on the stock price at a time when the market's in a ton of turmoil, right? Like no matter what you say about the economy, are we in a recession, not, whatever, you know, we know there's turmoil. It's hard to get a good read on the economy. And Life Storage just flat turned Public Storage down, which I think took a lot of us by surprise and didn't think they were going to be able to get away with it with their investors. For you, as someone in who's dealt in the stock market, and we'll go further on this whole story because it played itself out over time, but when you initially saw that offer from Public Storage, it came public at the beginning of January. You see them offering a 17% premium on Life Storage's stock price. As someone who kind of has a little bit of a take on the market, what did that say to you?
Well, it's a good sign, right? I mean, it's definitely a good space. I mean, if you look at even just Public Storage's stock, I think it trades from like a buck 80 to about 200. You know,
290 to 300 is Public Storage's.
Okay, 290 to 300. But if you look at their earnings, if I'm not mistaken, their last earnings they reported 1% down, but every other earning they beat. So,
Yep.
And that's year over year, you know, month over month. So if you really look at the grand scheme of things, I think it's just a lucrative sector that we're in right now, and we have to take full knowledge of that and understand that we're in this it's an industry that is growing and it's there for a reason, and I think it's going to continue to grow the way that it's been publicized, and them turning that down just shows you how much acclimates that company has, you know what I mean? As a company, it's just phenomenal just to see that growth.
They had traded Life Storage. When I say Life Storage had traded at $150 a share previous to the interest rate hikes, right? And so they dropped about 40 points on the interest rate hikes. To give a little context there, pre-COVID, their historical high was in the $70 range. So they had more than doubled their value during COVID until the hike in interest rates that had brought their stock price back down. But interestingly enough, not really real numbers, right? Their revenue hadn't changed hardly at all. It was more stock value and you know what the perceived value of the company is. Of course, we found out last month Extra Space comes in after they see the Public Storage offer rebuffed. Extra Space is number 2. They come in, they don't offer $129. They offer $148 and change for their stock. And, you know, apparently now there's going to be a merger of those two companies. So it turns out Life Storage knew something the rest of us didn't.
Yeah. And, you know, any M&A and that any type of merger and acquisitions is always a good thing in a sector. It always shows that there's growth. You know, there's potential growth. And, you know, instead of two companies saying, hey, let's go toe to toe or head to head with each other, you know, one's going to just acquire the other and just become more of a, you know, behemoth.
And not like the like JP Morgan Chase taking over First Republic on a fire sale, but a premium price paid for Life Storage. Their investors are going to make it. I think $12.1 billion was the evaluation of that merger. Just not a small amount of money, right? And quite frankly, why we all love this business, because I have a friend who always tells me, he's like, you know, it's so nice to be in an industry where the rounding errors are 7 figures, right? Like you're literally talking about $1 million is, you know, it's important. There's never a time when $1 million isn't. But the simple fact that we can talk about rounding by $1 million in the industry is crazy. But you see transactions like that, and it just highlights how incredible this business has been. I think actually Joe Evangelisti, who hopped on here a second ago, put a comment in a few minutes ago, and thanks for the accolades, Joe. I appreciate it. He mentioned in a live he did yesterday, I think that the industry was valued in the low 20s 20 billions in the early 20s, like before COVID happened. No, I lied. Right after COVID is when he said that number in the, I think, 2010 or 2011. It's up valued in the high 30s now in billions, and projected to be in the high 50s by the end of the 2020. So the growth rate has just been astounding. Wanted to transition a little bit. One of the things you deal with a ton is square foot per capita. And I want to explain to the people that are listening what that means, right? We have a number that we know. The Self-Storage Almanac comes out every year, and the I think the SSA is responsible for that, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Whoever publishes the Self-Storage Almanac, they simply divide the total number of square feet of self-storage available in the country in classes A, B, and C, right? So if it's like a gravel dirt drive up, crumbling shack, it doesn't count. But classes A, B, and C, and then they divide it by the total number of people in the United States, and
That's it.
that's our square foot per capita. That simple. Now that number varies widely from state to state,
It does.
and your deal is you have to make sure you're not vastly over the square foot per capita in a given area, because the bank simply won't lend on a project if you're in, like, I think Massachusetts has like 3.5 per capita for the whole state, and you're in an area where there's 10 available. The bank's not going to come in and be like, hey, we're going to fund this project because this place needs more self-storage, right?
Yeah.
I was very interested when the almanac came out a month and a half, 2 months ago. 2022, there was actually a decrease in the total square foot per capita, right? It went from 6.2 in 2021 to 6.1 in 2022. The numbers flipped, right? As the two went on the year, the two went away on the square foot per capita. Why I'm going down this road? At the end of the day, that number is really, it's just what's existing, right? It's not like, it doesn't tell us exactly what's going to happen. If we go in a market where there's 6 square foot per capita, and all of a sudden we're going to build and it's going to be 9, we don't know if the market's going to demand it for sure or not, right? It's just an average.
Yeah.
So you, as an acquisitions guy, what other tools are you using to kind of, because if you only ever looked for a piece of land that had less than the average square foot per capita, you're kind of smiling, because you'd probably never ever be able to find a piece of raw land that you could even look at. So what other tools are you using to kind of like balance those scales, I guess is the way I would say it, to make sure that, hey, look, yeah, we can't get stupid on square foot per capita, but what are some other things that I'm going to look at to make sure that I'm not going overboard on a site and in danger of oversaturating a market?
Number one, that would be growth, because the growth starts, it'll negate that saturation. Do you get what I mean? So
Yeah.
growth is one thing I'll definitely look at. We've looked at certain areas where there's growth of 20%. That's phenomenal. If you've got 40,000 people and 20% growth, that eventually there's going to be demand for storage there. Even if your square foot per capita is a little tiny high. I also look at, another thing is rates. We look at the rates. We look at, occupancy is another one that we look at. Are these facilities? I'll cold call a lot of them, as you've seen, Thad, and I'll just find out, hey, listen, moving down from Jersey, do you have a 10 by 10? Just wondering what you guys, are charging for one. And you start putting 2 and 2 together, and you start realizing, okay, well, there's the facilities around there are full. This area is growing. The square foot capita is a little high, but there's good income. There's good median household. There's good household income, and there's good growth that I see in this whole area. And there's already a good pop meaning population in the 3 mile. I would definitely push that through. And say, hey, listen, let's take a little deeper dive into this one.
I find it so interesting. I went live a few weeks ago in your office, and I was just following along with you. I think you use CoStar, if I'm not mistaken. CoStar is like a paid commercial real estate platform that Adeel uses. And you have a process. Like a deal has a process that he follows. It is not a process that you understand when you stand behind a deal and watch him going through CoStar. And I think I followed you for like 7 minutes. And I take it back. At 13 minutes, I was live, and I think you identified 7 sites that you put under review in 13 minutes. I think those were the numbers. First of all, tell me your process. How do you go about figuring out where you're going to look at self-storage sites, and how long did it take you to get so proficient that you could literally look at more than 1,000 sites in a quarter?
One thing is I always get data. Data is always good. Where you like you just honed on square foot per capita. What's the lowest states that have that? I'll go start looking at list of that. Start looking at states that have the highest rates. Then I'll start looking at states that have the most opportunity for us to go to. So then I'll start honing on those, and then I'll start looking at the cities that they're in, right? And then I'll just go through what I feel like. I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm going to hit the Midwest today, and I'm going to hone on these ones that I have a list of. And data is a lot is my friend in this a lot. And the more data you have, the better decisions you can make, and the better states you can visit, and the more sites that you're able to close. It's a simple thing, and it's a numbers game. You know that it's becoming more and more efficient with more and more data that we have, and then having Anthony on board has been crucial to our acquisitions team in regards to getting so much more information.
You don't have to say good things about him. He's not watching. He's just like you. When he's not on the show, he doesn't tune in. So we will say nothing good about Anthony Amuso while he's not watching. That's too funny. No, I'm kidding. Your point is well served. Anthony is he's a 25-year-old kid, which annoys me because he's half my age. But man, I wish I was as talented and sitting in the place he is at 25 years old. I was working in Presque Isle, Maine for $6 an hour. And Anthony's literally involved in $1 billion. What's going to be, we're already a $200 million company. We're quickly on our way to $1 billion company. And he's definitely been a big piece of that growth. So I don't mean to, I was kind of kidding him, but definitely don't mean to take away his importance.
No, 100%.
So I'm going to circle back to something you said earlier. And I think it's something that we've all come to realize is drastically different in the commercial real estate world than in the residential real estate world, right? When I was flipping houses, that's how I first got into this. I know you did it. I was in a certain area. And I developed a relationship with just 2 brokers that brought me all the 9 houses that I participated in came from 2 brokers, right? Not even brokers, agents. But of course, I was geographically in one place. It's been very different in self-storage, right? And you talked earlier about direct to seller, which obviously we try and do whenever we can. For whatever reason, people that own commercial land, very different animal than people that own a house, right? It's not like, those of us that have been in residential real estate, you go pull a list, you call motivated sellers, people that have owned their house for 15, 20 years, you're going to get 1% that want to sell. You just knew that math and it was going to work. Very different animal in the commercial world, not only with the sellers and going direct to seller, which is very challenging, but also in developing a relationship with a single broker to try and get a bunch of pipeline of deals. Is just very, very challenging to do.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, I think in residential, what happens is you get a lot of new flippers that are in the game, and they're all in. Their chips are all on the table, right? It's like, and then they have a timeline. They've got to flip the house. They've got to make a profit, and they're eating into their profit by running cost every day, right? With commercial land, it's inherited. It's been passed down from generation to generation. And if it's a doctor that might own it, and he could give 2 shits less, it's like, it's a write-off for him. Do you get what I mean? He just needs it for a write-off. So it's a completely, like you said, a completely different animal, and it's a completely different ball game when you're dealing with people with commercial land as opposed to residential real estate. It's a completely different ball game.
And I know you've done business with a couple of brokers on a couple of deals,
Yeah.
but really hasn't, like, we always kind of would talk a year ago and be like, man, this guy's going to end up bringing me 10 deals. And for whatever reason, it just hasn't played out that way. What do you attribute that to? What do you think is the reason for that?
I think a lot of it is if you're dealing with, I mean, specifically if you're dealing with somebody, let's just say in Houston, Texas, right? I feel like they don't want to get out of that bubble. I feel like they're in that Houston and they just want to stay in Houston. But Texas is a huge state. They can have connections elsewhere. So I always look at it as if, if I knew somebody, I would always have some connections down in San Antonio or maybe, the Fort Worth area or Dallas or any of those areas. And I feel like they're so confined to and comfortable where they're at that they're not willing to venture out and to see what else is out there as well.
Absolutely love your insight. So I'm going to finish up. We're at 7:40 now, and always try and protect people's time. Really appreciate. We're actually at 7:41 almost.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you coming on and spending a Wednesday evening with you. I know how much you grind. I'll call you on a Saturday afternoon and you're working it. If you don't have your kids and you're not spending quality time with your kids, you're like all in on this. And I guess that's kind of where I want to go. Why so all in this self-storage space? Why is it that you're so committed to putting that kind of grind in?
Because I feel like when you see Joe and Brian doing, when you see their vision, it's very clear. They're all in it themselves, right? How much more clear can it be? It's like we want to do 100 storage facilities within the next 10 years, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I see that they're all in every day, and that makes me want to come in all in every day as well. And it's just that's just the bottom line. I don't think there's anything else I could say. It's like I enjoy coming into an environment where the culture is completely different. The bars are raised. I've talked to many people at storage associations, and their goal is to do 5 deals a year. We're doing 5 a quarter. So our bars are raised, our drives are different. And like I said, when you come in, you see Brian and Joe at the office and they're putting in 100 and they're all in. You have nothing else to do but suit up and boot up and come in 100 miles an hour every single day as well. And I believe in that vision. I really honestly believe that we're going to get to our $1 billion mark as soon as we can.
I love that, man, and love working with you, Adeel. I know we've had some. Adeel always busts my chops because I love to do flying chest bumps in the office. Quite frankly, and I'll say this with you, and there's nothing better than when we close one of these deals.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Like, just to give people a little bit of, I think I'm not responsible for that sound. I was responsible for the last one, but that one wasn't me. We're talking about $1 million deals. And you guys that are listening, or if you're watching this on a recording, the reality is when you have a closing that is $2.3 million, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars that fall off to the people that are involved in it. And it's just life-changing kind of money. So one of the reasons we love self-storage so much, I want to tell everybody real quick, Adeel, ADEEL, at Invest with Legacy. If you're watching this and you are a commercial broker, reach out to this guy because he is hungry for land, man. If you can find raw land that fits our profile, he's happy to get on a call with you and explain our buyer's box and what it is we're looking for specifically, man. Get in touch. And as I said, we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars that everybody stands to profit from closing one of these. Adeel, love you, brother. So yeah, look at our Eric, our tech guy in the background is just taking care of us. I love it. He pops up the email instantly. Can't thank you enough for hopping on, Adeel. So much fun spending 45 minutes with you, Murph. As always,
that was a quick 45, man. That was fast.
It goes by so quickly every week, and we will see you guys. We may not be on next week, guys. We think we might have a conflict. We'll post in the group and make sure that we let you guys know exactly what's going on. But we'll keep everyone up to date. We'll certainly be back in the next couple of weeks with a strong list of guests, as we always have. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Don't be afraid to leave comments. Let us know if there's anyone you guys think we should interview or anything specifically about self-storage you guys want us to talk about. Put it in the self-storage cash flow and development group, man. We're all ears. We want to hear your input. We do this for you guys. Without further ado, Thaddeus Campbell, Steve Murphy, Adeel, say your last name. I pronounce it wrong.
Ahmad.
Ahmad. All right,
Yeah.
Ahmad. I massacred it like 16 times today. So Adeel Ahmad joined us. So thankful for him. You'd think I'd know how to say his last name. I'm too caught up in the fact that his name is literally Adeel, and he is the master of making a deal. Is like the most aptly named person on the face of the planet. We will see all of you guys soon. Thanks so much for tuning in.
All
Awesome.
right, then, guys. Take care. My pleasure.